Jai. 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 Verse 97 onward.
There's one with a very short purport I'm going to give. There's one with a very short purport. That's the one I'm going to give class on.
So that's 98. About Tapa Mishra?
Yeah. Well, it's just about, well, it's just 2 lines or something.
Uh-huh.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
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 Jaya Gopi Jana Radha Girivaradhari
Jaya Gopi Jana
Jaya Gopi Jana
Jaya Gopi Jana
Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana
Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana
Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Chamunatira Vanachari Chamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Radha Girivaradhari
Jaya Gopi Jana
Jaya Gopi Jana Radha Girivaradhari
Jaya Gopi Jana
Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Chamunatira Vanachari Chamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki,
Jai.
Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki,
Jai.
Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki,
Jai.
Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Namaskar Krishna So we're continuing our reading from Srila Prabhupada Charitamrita, chapter entitled India Unifying ISKCON. Yet, to take up this path, one would have to be tolerant. Financial needs, national and local governmental restrictions, ignorant and demoniac enemies of pure devotion to the Lord, envy, personal ambition and disagreements among neophyte devotees, struggles and fall-downs in the attempt to avoid illicit sex and intoxication. All these and many more problems complicated the preacher's mission. Srila Prabhupada, however, knew the struggle was worth it, even to save just one soul from the cycle of birth and death. Prabhupada wanted his more advanced disciples to share the struggle with him, and when he saw competence and sincerity in some of his senior members, he tried to turn affairs over to them and concentrate more on his life's mission of presenting all 12 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. Always the devotees were enthusiastically pressing Prabhupada to translate and write more books so that they could read them and distribute them. Srila Prabhupada replied that he was trying his best, but that the task was not mechanical. Great concentration and peace of mind were required. He could not write while at the same time being besieged by dozens of threatening, complicated issues. When the GBC member responsible for Gurukul wrote Srila Prabhupada with a plan that all ISKCON centers should support the educational system, Prabhupada replied, "As far as taxing the centers for the maintenance, that should be considered amongst the GBC. When a controversy arose in the Stockholm Centre and devotees appealed to Prabhupada for a judgment, he replied, "This must be considered at a full meeting of the GBC," and he added, "All of our students will have to become guru, but they are not qualified." Srila Prabhupada said that sexual attraction, making unnecessary changes, and fighting among God brothers were all Western diseases. Krishna consciousness was the path of perfection, and if his disciples stayed persistently and sincerely on the path, they could certainly succeed. Sometimes, however, Prabhupada saw that the Western diseases were overcoming his disciples, and even the GBC members would seem unable to stop it. Yet unless they spared him from such headaches, how could he do the higher work? GBC, he said, must mean that by his managing there are not any complaints, so that I can be relieved to do the translation work. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
So, in a lead up to the festival of Gaura Punim, which celebrates the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya, we're reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita twice a week on a Saturday and on a Sunday. So also it will be of interest to devotees, both here at the temple and also our congregational members who are attending classes online, that we've just been talking about the GBC there. So our present GBC have a very exciting series of seminars on the subject of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And they've invited 75 sannyasis and GBC members and other scholars and devotees within ISKCON to give presentations, at least 3 every day from now till Gaurapunim. And you can listen to these and watch these. Actually, it's on YouTube and on Facebook Live. And it's called the GBC SPT. That's the governing. The GBC is the ISKCON Governing Body Commission Strategic Planning Team. So I was fortunate enough yesterday to have a little time to listen to one seminar by His Grace Sutapa Prabhu. And Sutapa Prabhu has compiled a book with the assistance of the School of Bhakti in London called Compact CC. And just like he also compiled a book called Gita Life, where he condensed the teachings of the Gita into very easily memorable sections. So he's also done the same with the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I recommend that you listen to his, it's an interview with Pancharatna Prabhu, and it's about 1 hour long. But even if you haven't got time to listen to the whole lecture now, he shares his screen and he gives a very nice diagram of a thematic study of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yeah, so if you'll be able to somehow or other, yeah, he shares a link actually. I think he shares a link. That book, Compact CC, is available. It's from a link. Also, this month, leading up to Gaurapunim, then we're also encouraging devotees to procure a set of Chaitanya Charitamritas in this edition, which was basically the edition that Srila Prabhupada. We've been reading how Srila Prabhupada in 1974, anyway, in the mid-70s, he asked his BBT manager, Rameshwar Prabhu, to print the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita in 2 months. And we've been reading about how the devotees initially considered this impossible, but that they gradually, with Srila Prabhupada's empowerment, they published, printed, and illustrated these amazing teachings. So we have what is basically a slightly smaller edition, but it contains all of the text and all of the illustrations from the original edition. But instead of being in the original 17 volumes, which were very big, right, there was originally like 17 volumes that size. So now it's in 9 volumes this size, but it's still, the whole text is still there. So it's, yeah, so we have a lot of copies here at Karunabhavan, and anyone who wants to get hold of these copies, please get in touch with us. It's like, sorry?
Just 90 pounds.
Oh yeah, well I'm not supposed to, it is, yeah. Somebody in the temple shouted out an amount there. I didn't want to sound like a salesman from the Vyasa-san, but someone just informed me that they're only £90, which is like, you know, considering there's 11,500 verses, and each verse is real nectar. So less than a, sorry?
Less than a penny verse.
Sorry?
And purports.
Yeah, the purports and the verses are nectar. So anyway, I'll just describe a little bit. I found Sutapa Prabhu's presentation very empowering. Those of us who've been reading and studying the Srimad Bhagavatam for many years knows that it's difficult to really get a comprehensive grasp of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam because many different topics are discussed there, and there's also many conversations going on, some kind of embedded with it. There's one conversation embedded upon another and upon another, and it's like to do a systematic study is actually very difficult. Actually, Burijan Prabhu and Narayani Devi Dasi have both spent many years teaching our sannyasis in Vrindavan, and also here in Trunabhavan, Grace Janra Priya Mataji's studying Srimad Bhagavatam with the intention of teaching it soon in Bhakti Vaibhav. And normally, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is considered even higher than this. Srila Prabhupada described it as the postgraduate study. However, Srila Prabhupada actually, it's amazing that in 1966, when there were just one or two disciples in ISKCON, and Srila Prabhupada was still in the first temple in Matchless Gifts, and Srila Prabhupada gave a series of Chaitanya Charitamrita lectures on the conversation between Sanatana Goswami and Lord Chaitanya in Varanasi. Although it's very elevated subject matter, the way it's written by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and the way Srila Prabhupada has translated it means that most sections of the Chaitanya Charitamrita are very accessible, and in one sense they're more accessible than the Srimad Bhagavatam because it's set in a time frame in 15th, 16th century India, which we can kind of we can relate to it because it's not dissimilar from the culture that we live in today. Because today's culture in the West is very much grounded in the classical culture of Europe, and that has its roots in India. So it's so the way it's written and the way the events are described and the languages that it's used is very accessible, and it's easy. It's relatively easy to follow the flow of the narrative. So Chaitanya he's coined 12 words to describe the entire book. And I only spent about an hour on this yesterday, and actually I've remembered all of them, which is amazing because I've never really had a great deal of success doing a systematic study of Shastra. And so it's very nice. It starts in the Adi Lila with the first few chapters is described as the invocation. Krishnadas Kaviraj first establishes the tattva of Lord Chaitanya and his associates, spending a lot of time discussing the identity of Lord Chaitanya, of the Panchatattva, of the spiritual masters, and of the relationship between these different categories of spiritual individuals. So that's like the first 12 chapters, that's the invocation. And then after that, the appearance of Lord Chaitanya is described, and his childhood pastimes. So this Chaitanya Prabhu describes this as the incarnation section. And then Lord Chaitanya exhibits the pastime of being a precocious scholar, Nimai Pandit, and has very funny pastimes, where he's the supreme wind-up merchant. And that section is called Education. And then when Lord Chaitanya, in the very last chapter of the Adi Lila, chapter 17, Lord Chaitanya has a transformation through his association with Ishvara Puri, who acts as his spiritual master. And then Lord Chaitanya fully embraces the mood of being like a devotee intoxicated by a pure love Krishna. So that's the first 4 sections in the Adi Lila. That's invocation, incarnation, education, and transformation. And then the second, in the Madhya Lila, begins with Lord Chaitanya taking sannyas, so that's renunciation. And then is the pastimes of him leaving Navadvip and travelling to Orissa, to Jagannath Puri. And then he went travelling and preaching the holy name in South India. And then when he returned to Jagannath Puri, he was also preaching, especially having many kirtans, most famous kirtan being in the Jagannath Rath Yatra festival. So that section is described as propagation, the preaching of the holy name. Yeah, so that's and then Lord Chaitanya had a deep desire to visit Vrindavan, but this meant leaving his devotees in Jagannath Puri. So there are many pastimes there about how the Lord had a real desire to go to Jagannath Puri, but his devotees were begging him to stay, and he had to make several different attempts. And that section is called Aspiration. He's aspiring to visit Vrindavan. And then the final part of the Madhya Lila involves Lord Chaitanya's teaching the science of Krishna consciousness to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, and also deputing them to Vrindavan to establish Krishna consciousness there very strongly, and also sending Lord Nityananda to Bengal. So that section is called the organization. So therefore in the Madhya Lila we've got renunciation, propagation, aspiration, and organization. And then in the Antya Lila, the first 10 chapters or so, actually no, the first 14 chapters, there are many nice interactions with Lord Chaitanya and his closest devotees, and he's expressing great appreciation for them, like he's greatly appreciating, for example, Haridas Thakur, Rupa Goswami, different devotees. He's glorifying them, and he's also, through that glorification, he's teaching us how, like, different aspects of Vaishnava etiquette. But he's also criticizing as well. He's chastising by the pastime of chastising Chota Haridas and Ramananda Puri. So there's that section. So the first two sections are appreciation and correction, and then there's several chapters, 5 or 6 chapters, where Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes Lord Chaitanya's entering into a mood of transcendental madness, where he's experiencing the emotions of Srimati Radharani. So that section is called Intoxication. And then in the last chapter of the Antya Lila, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami dedicates that chapter to giving a commentary on Lord Chaitanya's Shikshashram prayers. So that last section, chapter 20, is called Instruction. So in this way, Sutta Prabhu, it's amazing, he's actually coined these kind of, and they're not exactly acronyms, but different words to give so that whatever, and it's not that the instruction is only in that chapter, and it's not the organization is only in that chapter, but you can actually create links between all of these different phenomena in a kind of different maps, different thematic maps. So that's I found that very inspiring. And actually, this particular pastime that we're reading from at the moment, which is Lord Chaitanya in Varanasi, is very interesting, and this pastime actually appears in 3 of these different sections. So we're going to read today from the Madhya Lila, chapter 17, text. What text is it in that?
97.
97.
Chapter 17.
It's chapter 17, isn't it? Isn't it? Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya
Shri
Shri
Chaitanya
Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 17, chapter entitled The Lord Travels to Vrindavan, text 97 and 98. Nirantar dune chinti tomara charan, savagya ishvara tumi dila darshan. My dear Lord, we too think of your lotus feet incessantly. Although you are the omniscient, supreme personality of Godhead, you have granted us your audience. Text 98. Is it on text 98, Rinda?
Yeah.
Shuni
Shri
Mahaprabhu
Mahaprabhu,
Yabena Sri Vrindavane.
Shri Vrindavane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabena Sri Vrindavane.
Shri Mahaprabhu Yabena Shri Vrindavane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane. Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabin Sri Vrindavane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabena Shri Vrindavane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabin Sri Vrindavane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabena Shri Vrindavane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabin Sri Vrindavane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabena Shri Vrindavane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Oh Lord. Linda.
Oh, so.
How do we recite it?
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabena Shri Vrindavane.
Shuni Mahaprabhu Yabin Sri Vrindavane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane.
Dina Kata Rahi Tara Britya Duijane. Shuni, I hear. Mahaprabhu,
Mahaprabhu,
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
Yabena, will go. Sri Vrindavane,
Sri Vrindavane,
to Vrindavana.
to Vrindavana.
Dinakata, for some days.
For some days.
Rahi, staying. Tara, please
deliver.
Britya,
Britya,
servants. Dvijane,
Sujane,
two persons.
2 persons.
Translation. My dear Lord, I have heard that you are going to Vrindavan. Please stay here at Varanasi for some days and deliver us, for we are your 2 servants. Please repeat. My Lord,
My Lord,
My Lord,
I have heard that you are going to Vrindavan.
I have heard you go to Vrindavan.
Please stay here at Varanasi
Please stay here at Varanasi
for some days and deliver us,
for some days and deliver us,
for we are your 2 servants.
for we are your 2 servants.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although Chandrasekhara is an eternal servant of the Lord, he humbly presented himself as fallen, and therefore he requested the Lord to deliver him and Tapana Mishra, his 2 servants. Namagyanatimrandasya gananjana shlakaya chakshurumlitam jena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishnu Stravatam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupkatamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru and Vaishnavam Stra Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitamtam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Harijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakam Vitam Stra. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu, Jagatpate, Gopisha, Gopya Kanta, Radha Kanta Namostate, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radha Vrindavaneshwari, Vishabhanu Sutadevi, Pranamami Hari Priye, Panchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sundarayevicha, Patitana Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Do you have the tissues?
If you can take it.
Oh, they are. You might drop those. So as I mentioned, this particular pastime, and especially the 2 personalities, 2 devotees of Lord Chaitanya, Chandrasekhara and Tapana Mishra, and they actually pop up in several of these different sections which are analysed by Sutapi Prabhu in the book Compact CC. And it's really in relationship to Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in Varanasi. So, as we've been hearing, this section of Lord Chaitanya's attempts to travel to Vrindavan, Sutapi Prabhu defines this as the aspiration section of the Madhya Lila. And so we can understand from Lord Chaitanya's earlier pastimes, from his childhood pastimes, his incarnation pastime, his education pastime, his transformation pastimes, his renunciation pastimes, that generally when Lord Chaitanya wanted to do something, nothing very much could stand in his way except one thing. And what's that one thing?
Devotees.
Yeah, well,
Desire.
so the desire of his devotees. So whenever Lord Chaitanya expressed a desire to leave Jagannath Puri, then his most dear disciples, such as Gadadhar Pandit and Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar, they would try to think of ways to keep Lord Chaitanya there, and like almost as if they. That was the Leela, that somehow that they were covered. Anyway, we don't know, but anyway, they knew that Lord Chaitanya was very affectionate to his devotees, And it wasn't that they were pretending that they were going to be devastated. They were devastated when Lord Chaitanya left, but at the same time they knew that Lord Chaitanya was very, very determined to execute his preaching mission and other aspects of his purpose for his incarnation. So they couldn't really stop him by force, but they stopped him with humility and like expressing an honest expression that they wouldn't be able to live without him, or that to live without him would be exceptionally painful. For that reason, then, this section of Lord Chaitanya going to Vrindavan has like many interesting aspects to it. And so, actually, it's very interesting as well that there's a section in, it's also linked to an earlier meeting of Tapana Mishra in East Bengal, when Lord Chaitanya was still a householder. He went to East Bengal while he was still a Pandit, and while he was still known as Nimai Pandit, and he went and travelled in East Bengal on the plea of expanding his scholarship. But he also met several very special devotees there. Actually, and one of them was Tapan Mishra. And when he met Tapan Mishra, he told him actually to chant always the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and he stayed with him for some time, and Tapan Mishra became like very ecstatic in his association. And he also told Tapan Mishra to relocate to Varanasi, which was like, so it's like an extraordinary instruction. But Lord Chaitanya so even at that time, Lord Chaitanya was already like planning his pastimes in Varanasi. Also in an earlier pastime, which is related, another pastime related in Chaitanya Bhagavat, is Lord Chaitanya's association with Murari Gupta. And at one time, Lord Chaitanya kind of goes into this time he wasn't often displaying his like in a meening to the devotees, but on one occasion he like went into the bar of Krishna as the supreme controller, and he actually said, Lord Chaitanya said to Murari Gupta that in Varanasi there's a Mayavadi sannyasi, and by his words he is trying to cut me to pieces, because he's teaching that my eternal, beautiful form is illusion. So he's actually, by his words, he's killing me, he's tearing me to pieces. And so that, and then Lord Chaitanya expressed that he was going to deal with this. He was going to deal with this, this like enemy of his devotees. That in some way, in the future, he was going to put a stop to the activities of Prakashananda. So now we've just been reading in this section in the Madhya, in the aspiration section, Lord Chaitanya going to Vrindavan. So he's been travelling alone with Balabhadra Bhattacharya, just one servant assisting him on his travels, and now he's come to Varanasi, having travelled through the Jarakanda forest, and almost immediately upon entering into Varanasi, which, as most of us know, even if we haven't been there, it's a very famous city, Benares, and also called Kashi. And just as it's a very big holy place now, it was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, like theatres in India at that time. It was a very, very busy city. But as soon as Lord Chaitanya arrived in Kashi, immediately he met Tapana Mishra. And so Tapana Mishra was so ecstatic to see him. Actually, Tapana Mishra had already heard that Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas and left Navadvip. So, and then all of the other associates of Lord Chaitanya in Navadvip were devastated by this news. Tapana Mishra was actually very happy to hear that Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas. So he had this kind of different kind of relationship with Lord Chaitanya. He was very happy that Lord Chaitanya was traveling and teaching in this way, because he met Lord Chaitanya when Lord Chaitanya was traveling in East Bengal. And so Lord Chaitanya left East Bengal to go back to his household life in Navadvip. So Tapana Mishra was feeling the separation of Lord Chaitanya both in East Bengal and also in Kashi. So when Tapana Mishra was in Benares, in Varanasi, then he was also feeling the separation from Lord Chaitanya, who was still in his household environment in Navadvip. So when he heard that Lord Chaitanya was taking sannyas, he was immediately very pleased, thinking that perhaps Lord Chaitanya is coming to Varanasi soon. But now, having come to Varanasi after so many years, now Lord Chaitanya is going to Vrindavan. So therefore, Tapana Mishra begs him to please stay with me, and also both of them actually, Chandrasekhara. Now Chandrasekhara is also a very long-standing associate of Lord Chaitanya, who was in the association of Lord Chaitanya in Navadvip also. I couldn't find actually the reason that he came to Varanasi. I'm trying to do some research on that to find out whether Lord Chaitanya also sent him there. I'm not sure, I haven't been able to find that information. But nevertheless, it's heard that these two devotees, at that time, they were the only devotees of Lord Chaitanya that we read about who lived in Varanasi, and they were very appreciative of each other's association. We just read that actually in a previous verse that one of them was always helping the other by reciting Krishna Katha to them. Anyway, so it's described. But anyway, so in the previous verse, here it is. Chandrasekhara said, "Due to my past deeds, I am residing at Varanasi, but here I do not hear anything but the words of Maya and Brahman. There is no talk at Varanasi other than discussion on the 6 philosophical theses. Nonetheless, Tapana Mishra has been very kind to me, for he speaks about topics relating to Lord Krishna." So, so Lord Chaitanya had made an arrangement that these two devotees could have each other's association, even though they had very little other Vaishnava association. But they always meditated on the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. And they were, in their humility, they were praying that Lord Chaitanya would stay there and for some days and give them shelter, give them deliverance. So it's interesting in another purport on Srila Prabhupada discussing this relationship between Tapanameshwara, Chandrasekhara and Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada describes them both as being Kanishka Adhikaris, in the sense that their faith was to some degree disturbed, even if their faith wasn't destroyed, but their faith was disturbed by the the association or the influence of the Mayavadi philosophers, and because they were living in a city, Kashi, which was like the home at that time of the predominant Shankaracharya followers, who were preaching that Jaganmitra, Brahma Satya Jaganmitra, that only the undifferentiated Brahman is the absolute truth, and all different varieties, of material energy, both apparently living and non-living, are just illusion. So they were asking to be delivered by Lord Chaitanya, because they could feel their devotional energy being threatened. So whether this was actually out of humility, but actually when Srila Prabhupada said they were Kanishka Adhikaris, and this would suggest that Srila Prabhupada is saying that there was actually some danger there, that it wasn't just purely like humility, but they actually perceived that this was such a dangerous environment. Actually, in various shastras, it's recommended that one shouldn't remain in the association of persons who can destroy one's faith, that one should leave that place very quickly, or make some other arrangement that one never hears words that can destroy one's faith. But they had very little choice in that environment. So, this pastime is described in chapter 7 of the Adi Lila, in the invocation section, on the glories of the Panchatattva. So Lord Chaitanya, Krishna Das Kaviraj, he really sees this pastime of the deliverance of Prakashananda and the Mayavadi sannyasis as being an extremely important pastime of Lord Chaitanya. And so Lord Chaitanya went to Vrindavan, and then as he was returning to Jagannath Puri, he stopped in Prayag and met Rupa Goswami, and he instructed Rupa Goswami at that time. And then after that, Sanatana Goswami was also there, and Chandrasekhara Acharya, and they came with Lord Chaitanya from Lord Chaitanya's teaching Rupa Goswami in Prayag. They came to Varanasi, and Sanatana Goswami, actually at that time, he was staying with Chandrasekhara. And Lord Chaitanya instructed Sanatana Goswami at that time. So Chandrasekhara plays a very big part in this pastime between Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami. And then at that time, after instructing Sanatana Goswami, then at the Dashashvamedha Ghat in Varanasi, then Lord Chaitanya made an arrangement that to be able to be invited to an assembly in which Prakashananda, the leader of the Shankara Sampradaya, came with all of his disciples, and Lord Chaitanya discussed Vedanta philosophy with him, and all of the disciples were amazed by Lord Chaitanya's beauty, and Prakashananda was amazed by Lord Chaitanya's knowledge, and he actually understood that Lord Chaitanya was none other than Narayan. In this way, Lord Chaitanya both protected his Kanishka devotees, both by staying with them and giving his association, but also by eliminating the Mayavadi elements who were destroying, or who they felt that their bhakti was being challenged or attacked by this Mayavadi influence. So it's it's very nice how these different leaders of Tapanamrishra and Chandrasekhara. So even though they're described as Kanishka Adhikaris, they actually play an important role in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And from this we can take that this is really because they lived in Kashi. So this is like, even though it might seem like it was a very strange thing for a spiritual master to send his disciples to a place where there were no Vaishnavas and where they were endangered by the influence of the Mayavadis, but still the Lord Chaitanya had a pastime to perform there, and he wanted to stay somewhere, so he blessed them by staying in their home, and then they got the association of other great devotees like Sanatana Goswami also. And so even though we may find ourselves in a place, perhaps like Glasgow or Preston or Falkirk or Aberdeen, where there are not a lot of Vaishnavas, but perhaps Lord Chaitanya has a plan, and we're just going to try and stay here and wait to see how things unfold. So thank you very much for your attention. And so please I recommend that you tune in to the GBC Strategic Planning Team's seminars in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The next one is going to be given by Loknath Goswami, and it's called The Super Excellence of the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. So, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions online?
No comments, thumbs up and a wow, 4 wow emojis.
Raj Chaitanya Charitamrita ki
Jai.
Shri Karunataya Michael Shashi ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanandi.
Evil. His Grace Javat Vasi ki Jai.
Nantakoti Vaishnavanda ki Jai.
Mm-hmm.